Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee, Art, Design, and Architecture. This show is coming to you from Florida on a gorgeous Sunday morning overlooking the gentle lapping waves on the Gulf of Mexico. My motivation for this podcast channel is to broadcast good news stories, interesting people, and food for thought. So pour yourself a nice hot cup of tea or coffee, take a deep breath, get cozy, and enjoy taking a break for some uplifting conversation. This morning's guest is Erica Cirino, and her book is Thicker Than Water, published by Island Press in 2021. Erica is a science writer and artist who explores the intersection of the human and non-human worlds. Her photographic and written works have appeared in Scientific America, The Guardian, Vice, Hawkeye Magazine, The Atlantic, and other esteemed publications. She is the recipient of fellowships from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Craig Newman Graduate School of Journalism, and the Safina Center, as well as several awards for her visual art. Good morning, Erica. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Tricia. Thanks for having me.
Do you have your cup of tea or coffee this morning?
I do. It's ready. It's piping hot.
Oh, good. So we're all ready to get started and have some conversation. This is an interesting book, and plastic and water. It's something that we've been talked about for quite a while, as I see from your book. But tell us, what was your motivation for writing this book now?
Thanks so much. So beginning in my teens, I started working as a wildlife rehabilitator. And like many people, I started noticing plastic building up in the environment all around me. And growing up in coastal Long Island, New York, I noticed a lot of plastic on beaches in particular. And plastic has really, like you said, been posed as an ocean issue for such a long time. But when I started working as a photojournalist in 2015, in 2016, I began exploring the issue of plastic and its wide-ranging reach of implications. And so I soon came to realize that it's not just plastic in the ocean that's a problem, but I sailed out into the ocean and from tracing my way from this oceanic repository of trash back to land, learned that we're really all enveloped in a plastic soup. And the production of plastic is also extremely harmful to our planet, our people, and the way that we live. So it's a much bigger story than just maybe a floating dump of garbage. You know, we've talked about in the media a lot the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and that was the place that I first visited in my journey because I really wanted to understand what it was like out there. And the reality is far more dire than the issue has seemed. So I wrote the book to bring attention to that.
Yes, I really like how you wrote it because it's science based, but it's very easy to read and conversational. Right. It's about your journey.
Yeah, and I wanted to invite people to come with me out into the garbage patch. I realized that it's not an activity that many people might seek out. It's not easy to get there. It's extremely time consuming, and the conditions are unbelievably challenging at times. I mean, we spent 24 days, we being a group of sailors and scientists, in addition to me and one other creative person on board, the photographer and filmmaker Chris Jordan. And we were on board to understand what was really happening out there on this very, very simple steel sloop. And so in my book, I wanted to bring people to this place to really understand what the reality is.
So tell me, let's tell our audience, like, what really is plastic? How is it manufactured?
Right. So all the plastic items all around us, and I invite listeners to kind of give their room or wherever they are, maybe their car, or they might be out for a walk, just give a little glance all around you and start noticing the items around you and questioning what they're made of. So much of what you see is likely made of plastic, depending where you are. But because plastic is so cheap and easy to make, it's made out of gas or oil, natural gas or oil. And because these are heavily subsidized industries, the corporations making plastic actually make a lot of money. And so we have this landscape now where people buy plastic because it's inexpensive. It has become extremely ubiquitous. And because it is a throwaway item, most plastic we use are throwaway items. The plastic corporations just need to keep making more and more because we throw it away. And so, yeah, we've just created a landscape now of this petrochemical based substance.
Yeah, even recently, it was brought back to my attention again, and I walked through my supermarket, and I was like, I can't hardly buy anything in here that's not encased once or twice in plastic.
Right,
Nothing.
it's very difficult.
And I started collecting glass jars again.
Nice.
Because everybody kind of makes fun of me. I'm like, no, I keep my glass jars and I use and reuse those. So how did plastic become so popular? What's the history of plastic?
Well, plastic was first rolled out actually for use in World War II, when it was hard to get materials, and governments and armies were kind of scrambling to get what they needed to participate in war. And plastic proved to be a lightweight, very versatile material on the battlefield. And so quickly after the war, when the industries that have been churning out plastic stuff looked to consumer markets rather than wartime markets, they realized they could start turning everyday items into plastic and then make those items suddenly disposable and convenient. And so, people, for some reason, our psychology, we love ease, we love comfort, and plastic can provide those things. We think, we feel. Or at least that's what we're sold, right, by the corporations who show us ads that explain how easy our lives will become if we use these plastic items. And that's exactly how plastic became so popular, is that the corporations making and selling it have poured so much money, fortunes into advertising their products and also marketing them across all sorts of media. And it is insidious and subtle. I mean, many of us might not realize it, but we've seen maybe hundreds of thousands to millions of ads in our lives. And a lot of that is for stuff made of plastic.
Yeah, it's just way back, kind of dating myself, but it was back in the 80s. I worked at a summer camp, and we had a little marine lab, and we were showing kids how plastic back then, it's these little plastic things for soda pop,
Right.
soda bottles. And I'm like, we haven't gotten anywhere.
That's how it can feel, because there is still so much plastic all around us, built up in the natural environment. And we use plastic in our everyday lives for so many purposes, from the grocery shopping bags that we get at the stores to cups that we get at takeout restaurants. And so, yeah, we are still using plastic. We're using plastic more than we ever have before. Annual production of plastic is growing very close to 400 million metric tons per year around the globe, which is an enormous amount of plastic.
Well, I'd like to take us, you took us on a little journey in Hawaii, and I'm from Hawaii. So
Wow.
I particularly like this section of your book. Can you tell us, and you use all these Hawaiian names. I was like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your journey off the Pacific coast? What did you do? How did you do it? What happened?
Right. So the garbage patch itself, I'll just explain for listeners. I sailed through the Eastern North Pacific Gyre, which is this oceanic current that fuels this patch, or what I now know as a soup of plastic, really. And so I made it to Hawaii after sailing from Los Angeles. It took 24 days. And once we arrived, this crew that I was with, this Danish crew, which was affiliated with an organization called Plastic Change, which is based in Denmark, they found other nonprofits on the Hawaiian Islands to kind of chat with and really understand the scope of the problem, because, we were all shocked by what we found in the oceans, surrounding this state. So we met with a group called Hawaii Wildlife Fund, and they brought us to this beach called Camilo Beach, and this is on the Big Island of Hawaii. And Camilo actually juts out into the swirling current of the garbage patch. And so much trash accumulates in particular on that beach. Other Hawaiian beaches are polluted as well, but this one in particular is just so heavily encrusted with plastic that it's posing a really dire situation for wildlife in the region. And so our crew stepped out onto Camilo Beach with Hawaii Wildlife Fund, and we learned that despite the efforts of their organization, which runs beach cleanups weekly and even sometimes more frequently than that, that the plastic trash just kept watching up from the gyre. And so once we got to Camilo Beach and saw the scope of the problem, it soon became apparent that the effects were much more insidious. And so I learned about how the plastic on the beaches was leading to feminization of sea turtle populations, for example, which could cause widespread extinction. That's because plastic actually increases the temperature of the sand. And in addition to that, it releases greenhouse gases that contribute to the climate crisis. And so it just compounds a lot of the problems with our planet that are already ongoing. And wildlife was getting entrapped. I met researchers who had found endangered monk seals and other animals entangled in plastic. I've met scientists who have been studying the traumatic effects of entanglements of fishing gear on whales. And the effects are so wide ranging, and it really goes from sea to shore. But once I had reached Camilo, I learned that the plastic is not, it's not an ocean problem. Like, this is starting on land. How, people are using plastic, and even on these remote beaches in Hawaii or in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, to see so much human stuff accumulated is really shocking.
Well, yeah, that's true. I feel like that, back in the 80s when I even worked at an aquarium, I did dolphin shows, and we had a specific show about recycling and how animals were getting trapped in plastic. I feel like, gosh, we were talking about that. Did we make any difference? And we were doing those educational programs. And is educational programs, are they making any difference?
So we have reacted, like the public in general, to the plastic crisis in so many different ways, and there are so many individual people and communities doing various things. Education being one of those very big things, in addition to, like I mentioned, cleanups and also recycling campaigns. And they do make a difference, and they are encouraging behavior that we've been told is helpful to address the plastic crisis. And unfortunately, it's just not enough. And in addition to that, these solutions that we've kind of come up with, they've been shaped also by this narrative that the plastics industry has set for us. And so the plastic industry has pushed recycling. However, so little plastic is actually recycled. Only about 9% of all plastic ever made has been recycled. And there's around 10 billion metric tons of plastic that have been produced since the mid 1900s. And so much of this has ended up in landfills in the natural environment. So it's accumulating all around us. And so to think that we can just clean it up, even though that's a very well-intentioned thing to do. And in fact, the educational aspect of cleanups and other campaigns is very big. And I do believe that the more people learn about plastic, the better. However, it is super important that they learn the truths about it. And so the more that we can get those truths out there, the better. I don't want to deter anyone from participating in a cleanup. Those do have very positive local effects. Education campaigns can encourage the right behaviors that we know do work. And I'll get to those solutions a bit later, I'm sure, in this conversation. But we have to also keep in mind that what we think we know about plastic, a lot of that has been shaped by misinformation. And so we need to react now by changing how we react.
Well, I thought it was interesting in this one word in your book that scientists are starting to call this the Plasticine era because we are so enveloped in plastic.
Right, exactly. And it is alarming. Plastic has been detected in air, freshwater, soils, seawater, pretty much every single ecosystem you could imagine, and all over the world, from the Mount Everest, peak of Mount Everest, to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So we're talking about a huge area of different elements and ecosystems that have been completely coated by plastic, and it is forming a new geological layer on the Earth, sometimes more apparent than in certain regions than others. I've been to beaches where you can clearly see layers of plastic just built up, and it's quite alarming. And to be living in this plasticine, what are the implications? Well, plastic particles, because they're made from petrochemicals, and due to the way that they are made into polymer chains, they don't break up or benignly degrade like most other materials. Instead, they just break up into smaller pieces of plastic, which each contain a cocktail of different chemicals that are added to plastic to give it certain qualities. So these are things like phthalates, BPA, and PFAs, which we know are highly toxic to people and can cause hormone and reproductive problems. And so to know that our whole environment now has been completely toxified has drew, of course, well, not of course, but luckily the interests of scientists and the concern of scientists. And just, last week, a group of scientists published a report saying that humans have passed a planetary boundary in releasing chemicals and plastic, man-made chemicals and plastic into our environment, past a point where we can reliably keep track of how much we are getting out there and how much we have let out. And it's reached very, very concerning levels. So we are facing this definitely a new geological age here.
Well, I think that leads into my next question too. You don't shy away from the hard topics, so
No,
we're gonna talk about it because that's the first start. Is just talking about things.
right,
The environmental justice and this effect on communities of color, indigenous people, and yeah, it's not too far from me, New Orleans.
right.
What are the environmental injustices of plastic?
So plastic inflicts injustices up and down the pipeline, from where plastic is disposed to where it is produced, and that's kind of the way I trace the path through. Um, I've been to communities that face the presence of landfills and recycling centers and incinerators. In fact, the community that I'm in right now has an incinerator, and many of these projects are painted as again green or clean. Incinerators have been marketed as kind of waste to energy technologies, where the heat from burning plastic and other waste is harnessed into electricity. And it's not an efficient means to do that, by the way. And in fact, incinerators emit huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, in addition to many other dangerous chemicals. And so, disposing of plastic is not good for people, and that should tell us something about plastic itself. Is that if there's no good way to get rid of it, and then why are we using it? So recycling centers as well, often very dirty, and as we know, very little plastic is really recycled. So instead of being recycled, much plastic is either incinerated, landfilled, dumped illegally, in some cases, and then also shipped far away all over the world, mostly from wealthier nations to less wealthy nations, in Eastern Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and in Asia. And it's unbelievable to know that our plastic is never going away. It's really only being pushed onto the shoulders of someone else, somewhere else. And whether it's a landfill, whether it's an incinerator, whether it's a dump, or a transfer station, people, and mostly people of color, indigenous people, other racialized groups, and also low income and rural people, they face this pollution at the end of the pipe, all the way to where plastic is produced, and even where the fossil fuels to make plastic are extracted. And so I've also been to the fence line communities, so-called fence line communities around petrochemical refineries and plastics factories, and they face enormous amounts of air pollution, water and soil pollution, and face the risk of constant disasters such as explosions and fires. And some people's residences are just a stone's throw away from these giant oil drums or extremely flammable liquids, and it's really a huge concern to see that the plastic industry is only expanding in reach, and again, affecting these already vulnerable communities. So, plastic not only leads to injustice, but it's also driven by our very racist and unjust systems, and it only makes it worse.
Yeah, I was reading your book to talk about the places that they're going to put these processing and manufacturing facilities is places that people may not have as much voting rights,
Right.
power, or feel like they do, and these places get put in lower income areas,
Right.
etc.
And yeah, and I want to point out too that many of these communities have been speaking out and fighting for justice for decades. And it is a very long running struggle, and very unfortunate that it's taken so long for people to kind of recognize that this is part of the cost that the world pays for the plastic that we use, and that is that people are suffering and paying with their lives. I mean, people that live in the shadow of the plastic industry are more likely to die prematurely. Their lifespans are significantly shorter due to the release of toxic chemicals released by plastic, all through the pipeline and by the facilities that process either waste or make plastic. So the cost is very, very, very high.
Well, and it kind of leads me to my next uh, question is, okay, it affects these communities, kind of, but it's affecting all of us because you were talking in your book about how these plastic particles are ending up in everyone's bodies, in affluent communities, middle class, everybody, as we've all got plastic in us.
Exactly. And so, it's becoming this kind of like equalizer in a way, because not even the corporations that make and sell plastic can run away from the fact that we are all being exposed at all times by the toxic chemicals and plastic particles around us. And the results of this are very hard to tease out because, again, there are so many synthetic chemicals, man-made chemicals that are emitted all around us all the time and are also found in the products that we use. Transparency is really needed because a lot of the chemicals around us are self-regulated by those industries that emit them, and the way that our governments are set up are not adequate. Another reason, just adding to the justice angle, that so much plastic development and petrochemical development happens in primarily Black, Brown, and Indigenous regions, is that the governments are pushing to get these facilities in places where zoning rules or maybe legislation is very lax for protecting these vulnerable communities. And so some people are more exposed than others, and that is a big part of this story. But all of us should be concerned. No matter where we live, this is an issue affecting all of us.
So these plastics in your research, well, I guess I have to say this allegedly, I guess. So these could be contributing factors to cancer, hormonal disruptors in our own bodies, and microplastics in everybody now at
Right.
this point.
Yeah. Just a few years ago, we didn't understand the extent, and it's hard to understand, as I said, the effects of just one singular pollutant on our bodies when we're surrounded by so many pollutants. But what has been found in recent years reveals that there could be tens of thousands of various chemicals, several thousand of which are very much known to be toxic to humans in plastic. So we know that for sure. Scientists are getting better at testing each plastic particle for potential chemical toxins or contaminants. And so we are getting more information that way. And it's not because the corporations are being forthcoming, it's because of this kind of flurry of energy around the plastic issue in the world of science. And also communities of people, of untrained scientists, are learning from scientists how to collect information about the chemicals around them, in the air and in the plastic. So we can see that people are concerned, scientists are concerned. We need to shut off the plastic pipe before the situation gets worse. Why are we waiting to see, if plastic is giving people cancer? We do see clusters of cancer and also other issues like respiratory diseases where plastic is typically produced and disposed. But the cumulative effects of, say, like a chronic exposure to plastic are not yet understood. However, we can tell that the chemicals in plastic are found inside of our bloodstreams and also in our tissues. And plastic has even been found in the placentas, on both sides of the placenta, in mothers and fetuses. And that's concerning because, even in unborn people are exposed to plastic apparently, and we don't yet know the effects of that.
So I guess it's a personal question. So at this point, if I went to the doctor and said, "Can you test me for plastics in my body?" Do they even have a way to do that, or would they just say, "I don't know"?
Well, first off, it's hard because these tests are often very, very expensive. You're going to be testing not for plastic itself, but for the chemicals it's known to carry. And to really understand whether or not you've been exposed to a specifically, plastic-linked chemical, you would need to test for something that's only found in plastic. And one of those kind of tracer chemicals could be phthalates, it could be PFAs. You would need to find something that's, almost exclusively found in plastic because there is, there are tons of chemicals all around us again. And so to know that we're exposed from plastic would be difficult. So unless we use those other tracing chemicals. But to find plastic itself it's like looking for a needle in the haystack. However, I've gotten extremely good at finding plastic all around me. And to understand how plastic gets inside of us, scientists have used models. They've also examined food. And plastic is totally widespread in our diet. And also, I'm laughing because it's a wild way to test this, but scientists know that we eat plastic because it's been found in fecal matter all over the world, human fecal matter. So it's going in us, it's coming out of us. What it's doing inside of is yet to be known. But we're finding out more and more all the time.
Oh, I thought that was interesting. In your book, they had a mannequin who was doing like some breathing
Right.
tests.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It was so interesting to meet the mannequin because it was seated at a table and really looked like C-3PO robot just sitting there. But there were two mechanical lungs inside this breathing mannequin, as they called it, that emulated the rate at which humans respirate. And so this mannequin was placed inside Danish college students' apartments. And if any of you have been to Denmark, you probably know that, the interior design there is, much more spare in most cases than in America. I think of America as, heavy synthetic carpets, lots of heavy furniture with synthetics, but in Denmark, the style is a little different. So I was shocked to learn that even in a very simple apartment without all the synthetic furniture, that I've come to know as normal, it was that this mannequin was breathing 11 particles of plastic per hour inside. And so to know that we're in our heavily furnished homes breathing in probably at least double that really concerned me. And it also led me to research more about plastic being found in air. And I also learned that our outdoor air is heavily contaminated by plastic, particularly in urban areas, but also from roadways, because when we drive our cars, all the action and braking and going over different types of surfaces wears the synthetic rubber, which is a type of plastic, off of our tires and into the air. So it's actually a very toxic type of plastic because there are all kinds of really hazardous chemicals in car tires to keep them from disintegrating in front of our eyes, but they do break up all the time.
Well, okay, that's my next question. I know I kind of can guess the answer. So
Yeah.
there's plastics in my body. Is there any way to rid my body of plastics?
I don't know any reliable way other than to try to keep your diet and behaviors as clear of plastic as possible. So cutting as much plastic out of your life will help minimize your exposure. We can't always help how much and where we're exposed, just based on the uncontrollable factors all around us. However, we do know that we can control our diets. I've become scarily good at finding little pieces of microplastic in food, whether it's a piece of a fiber from someone's jacket or a piece of a synthetic hat. I can see it now because I've been up close with scientists who do that for a living. So that's scary sometimes. However, cutting out bottled water and other bottled beverages is a great way to cut a lot of plastic out of our diets. And then just otherwise, buying food that's not been packed in plastic. As you mentioned earlier, that's not always easy when we go to our modern grocery stores, but participating in programs like community supported agriculture, farmers markets, and even asking your local shops to start selling refillable kinds of foods, like so that way you can bring your own bag or your own jar and fill it up with whatever food you want. These stores are becoming more and more common because people are demanding it. Is it widespread? No. Should it be widespread? Yes. But it shouldn't. It also shouldn't be on us to make it that way, although it is incredibly inspiring and also enlightening to see what people are coming up with. And we do see that the solutions to the plastic crisis are to move to a more circular, much less wasteful way of living, because we really learned how to live that way from the industries that wanted to sell these products to us. And it is possible to unlearn.
Yes, I think so. And to all the manufacturers out there, I even when I go to convenience stores, I refuse to buy. I don't care what if it's soda, water, if it's not in glass. I just don't buy it.
Right.
And now everybody laughs at me because I have like this whole glass jar collection.
Yeah.
Because there are a few people who do sell tea and that and glass jars, and I just keep my fill them with water, put it in a car.
Exactly. And it is important to note that the solutions do not need to be elitist or expensive, because I've seen a lot of companies kind of jumping on the renewable, reusable bandwagon. But you can just be as resourceful as using glass jars. Glass, metal, and paper are recycled at a much, much higher rate than plastic. They could be recycled even more than they are. However, it is easier and better to use those for the environment and to take advantage of the resources all around us. I've been doing plastic workshops with young people for the past few years, using marine debris and microplastic that I've found, and that I've worked with to get from Hawaii Wildlife Fund, actually. And so I've shared this plastic with so many people as a kind of a free art medium. And people have asked me, what about the toxic chemicals on it? I ask, the children to wash their hands afterwards. But it is a statement, and it is also a way to teach people about this problem.
Okay, well, I've got the next. I know I can hear it now. The next question is about jobs,
Mhm.
and that I was thinking about, all the jobs that the petrochemical companies are going to say that they create, but then I think that offsets with, my job also depended on the environment, because in Florida we sell the environment,
Right.
and what about my job that depends on a clean environment? What about jobs?
Well, we have to think about first the costs. So, what are the real costs of the plastic crisis? We know that it's our environment, we know it's human lives, but we also now know, thanks to the work of journalists and individuals working to bring the truth out there, that these heavily subsidized corporations are given breaks of about $6 trillion a year. And that's taxpayer money. And, you know, to be suffering from health problems and paying for all these issues, there is absolutely no way you can argue that the jobs from these corporations are worth more than our lives. And it's industries that are becoming more and more automated. I mean, they're building $9 billion factories that are huge and that are just mechanical. And a lot of the jobs are not going to people in the communities that are harmed. So it's just adding insult to injury, because it's development that will only destroy people's lives. It's not adding to people's lives. So we can't get into that argument. That's my point of view. The costs are just much too high.
And it's putting a cost on people to take care of their own health.
Right, exactly. And I've met people that living near plastic development that have been told by, their local governments or the corporations that there are no health effects, and yet they are suffering. So the rest of us who maybe don't know what it's like to live near a petrochemical development or plastic factory firsthand, we do need to listen. And the danger is grave, and the corporations will keep denying there is a problem. And so we do need kind of this reckoning that the problem is bad, and there are conversations that we need to have, and conversations we should just not get into, because the facts are out there now.
So what do I, as a consumer, I do believe that, pennies add up. If we had a world before plastic and it did just fine, and now we have a world with plastic, how do I, as a consumer, what can I do in my life to try and reduce my plastic exposure? And I don't know, how should I say this? Take my own personal responsibility for this situation too.
I mean, it all starts with us, in the sense that we need to embody the changes that our whole society needs. And I always encourage people to make the choices that not only benefit them, but address the plastic crisis, because it will help all of us to make this transition culturally as well. And, my reckoning came really only when I was out in the garbage patch and I started seeing this trash all around our ship, and living that simple life on the boat, thousands of miles from any other person besides those on the boat. It was like this unbelievable moment. And I started thinking about, what do I really need in life? And then what is it that I can kind of go without? And there is so much plastic we can go without. We don't need to buy from super convenient corporations that drop things off at our doorstep any hour of the day or night. We don't need those to-go drinks on the road that we can get from corporations that sell so-so coffee at a very high price, when we can make it ourselves and bring it with us in our reusable cups every day. A lot of the life that we live is actually spent purchasing stuff. And I realized that while I was out on the ocean, when there was absolutely nothing around us except blue sky and blue water and a whole lot of garbage. And that was a big moment to realize, why am I participating in these systems? And so we can start making those changes quite easily just by shifting our habits.
Well, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I didn't concretely list what you should start doing, but I think that is a big question that we can start asking ourselves. What do we need to live, and what can we live without?
Yeah, and I just thought, well, I was a dolphin trainer, and dolphin trainers, we all major in psychology because we're oddballs. We don't.
Well, dolphins are very intelligent, so I would understand why you might want to be armed with that information.
We need good psychology to do that show. This is getting off track a little bit, but it's a misconception that it's like I'm begging and asking and pleading the dolphin to do things. They'll let me know if they want to.
Exactly. Yeah.
It takes a lot of psychology. But, just starting, I mean, I think for me, it's like, I'm just going to start small and,
Mhm.
and work on something each week. Cause I was just talking about it with my mom, like, we got off track here. We got to get back on track and get rid of this stuff.
Mm. Right. Yeah. I mean, it is. We have gotten so far away from the lives that we could be living, and I think a lot of us might come to realize that the stuff that we have is not necessarily making us happy. And what does make us happy is connecting to other people and doing things that help rather than hurt. And some of the most inspiring people that I met were the people working on the plastic crisis. Everyone from scientists and sailors out in the Pacific to the folks working on environmental injustices in their own communities, and everyday people who might go to their local beach and say, hey, I don't think this is okay. I got to start being part of a solution. And so it is really encouraging to see people who do want the best for people on the planet and do feel compelled to speak up when they see something wrong happening. And that's exactly how we've gotten to this very exciting time where the status quo is being questioned very heavily. And we could be on the precipice of some really big change, but it's going to require we hold those industries and systems accountable, including our governments and people that were tasked with caring for us, because we've been let down. So, yeah, this is our moment. We could do something big.
Well, now this is my hardest question for you. So, what was your favorite part about writing this book, or a favorite story in your book?
Oh, that's a very hard question. I really enjoyed the journey. It was difficult, sometimes heartbreaking, but ultimately to learn so much about the world just by following one thread was a great privilege. And I am really grateful to the people that have shared their stories with me and have showed me the crisis close up, because it really did profoundly change my life. And I hope that this work can only help by sharing it.
Well, Erica, thank you so much for being here. My coffee is done. My
Same
tea.
here.
Same here. um, and I know you're taking up a lot of your time today, but can you let the audience know, what is your next big project? What do you have on the horizon?
So this winter and spring, I'll be giving a bunch of in-person, hopefully, pandemic restrictions kind of await us still. We don't know how it will be in a few months, but I'm going to be out and about on Long Island, New York, and in Eastern Connecticut, speaking about my book, signing books, and showing you some plastic close up from the garbage patch at various libraries and other free events. All throughout those coming months. So please feel free to stop by and say hi, and come see some garbage.
Your photography is really nice in here. So,
Thank you.
yeah, this is an excellent book, and it's a nice easy read. It's taking all the hard science down to like a more layman's level.
It's a problem we all need to know about, and I just wanted to make it accessible. I also want to point out that my book is available in many libraries across the U.S. and also in a few other countries, which I was excited to see. But you don't necessarily have to even buy my book to read it. So I just hope that you will read it in any way.
Oh, well, that's a good thing to. I'll mention to my listeners that if they didn't know this, that you can go to your public library and write a letter and say, I'd like for you to carry this book. Can you please buy it and carry it? And they can, sometimes they can do it.
It's amazing. And I'm really grateful for that as well. So we can all get the information that we need. It's great to have that resource of a library near us.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll let everybody know that the book is Thicker Than Water. The author is Erica Cirino, and it is published by Island Press in 2021. And I'm Trisha with Sunday Coffee, Art, Design, and Architecture. Thank you so much for listening today.